What would you do if one day your parents set your car on fire and your brother punched you? I know that sounds wild, but that's precisely what happened to me. Hello, everyone. My name's Rachel. I'm 30 years old and live alone in San Jose, California, in a 3-bedroom house I bought back in 2023 for just under $800,000. Every dollar that went into that house came from my hard work. No help from family, no loans from anyone, just sweat, sacrifice, and years of grinding. That house isn't just where I live. It's my most significant source of pride. It represents my independence, proof that I could make it on my own without leaning on anyone. I love every inch of it. From the backyard garden to the garage where I kept my beloved SUV. But that very house, the one I thought would bring me peace, became the center of the most brutal family meltdown I've ever been through. The drama I'm about to share isn't just some petty sibling fight. The story is about greed, betrayal, and how a family can tear itself apart in the ugliest way possible. The story begins on a weekend in late June 2024, when the doorbell rang and changed my life forever. It was a regular Sunday. I was sitting in the living room, sipping my morning coffee and watching the news on TV. California sunlight streamed through the curtains, filling the space with a warm, peaceful glow that I had come to treasure. This was my favorite moment of the week when I could enjoy the quiet comfort of my home. I was already mapping out a relaxing afternoon, maybe a movie, or finally finishing the book I'd been putting off when the doorbell suddenly rang. That sound shattered the calm like a lightning strike in the middle of a silent night. When I opened the door, the sight before me left me frozen. My parents and my brother, Mario, stood on the front porch, surrounded by 8 suitcases of all shapes and sizes. Some were old and worn. Others looked like they'd just been bought. They were piled chaotically along the walkway, forming a messy mountain of luggage. Right away, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. My dad looked tired and anxious, his eyes avoiding mine. My mom seemed irritated, lips tightly pressed together, and Mario. He stood in the back with his usual smug look, arms on his hips, like I owed him something. I didn't invite them in. I just stood at the doorway, keeping a safe distance between us. Alarms were already going off in my head. They never showed up unannounced, especially not with that much luggage. My reaction clearly pissed off my mom. When she realized I wasn't welcoming them in, she snapped, "This is how you greet your family? Is this how I raised you?" My dad tried to smooth things over, speaking in a gentler tone. "Rachel, can we come inside?" That question only made me more suspicious. The amount of luggage they brought made it look like they were planning to stay for a while. I stayed cold and guarded. Experience had taught me that something was always wrong whenever my family showed up out of nowhere, especially with Mario in tow. And this time, I was determined not to get dragged into any of their drama. I need to tell you what happened before to help you understand why I've grown so distant from my family. Around January 2024, my parents quietly sold their house in Beressa for $830,000. It was the home they had inherited from my grandfather after he passed away. At the time, I had no idea any of this was happening. That house in Beressa wasn't just property. It held so many pieces of my childhood. It was where Mario and I used to run around in the backyard, where Grandpa read us bedtime stories, and where the whole family came together for every holiday. After Grandpa passed, I assumed it would remain my parents' home forever. I only found out the truth by chance through Marcus, a friend who works in real estate. We were grabbing coffee when he casually asked about my parents selling the house. At first, I was confused and didn't believe him. But when Marcus pulled up the transaction details, I had no choice but to accept it. I felt hurt that they hadn't told me, but after thinking it over, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they just wanted to downsize. Find a place that suited them better. I chose not to question their decision, but 2 months later, I heard they were renting a small house in a different part of town. That didn't sit right with me. My gut told me something was off, so I asked Marcus to dig deeper into their financial situation. What he found shocked me. The $830,000 from the house sale had been transferred into Mario's bank account just 1 week after the deal closed. Marcus uncovered something even worse. Mario had convinced my parents that he had a can't-miss investment opportunity. He promised massive returns in just 3 months. With sweet talking and big dreams, he persuaded them to hand over every penny from the sale so he could manage it. The moment I heard that, a wave of dread hit me. I've known Mario my whole life. I know he has zero knowledge of investing. He knows how to burn through money and live off other people. And yet somehow my parents trusted him with their entire financial future. I couldn't just sit back. I hired a private investigator to find out what Mario had been doing over the past few months. And what came back hit me like a ton of bricks. There was no investment. Mario had used every cent to fund his luxury lifestyle. According to the investigator's report, he bought an $80,000 luxury car, rented a high-end downtown apartment for $5,000 a month, and threw non-stop lavish parties for his friends. He spent heavily on designer clothes, expensive trips, and high-end entertainment. Worse yet, he had become a regular at the casinos in Las Vegas, dropping massive amounts of money every visit. He lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in just a few trips. And all of it was money my parents had entrusted to him. The most heartbreaking part, my parents had no idea. They still believed Mario was making smart investments and that they'd be seeing a huge return soon. Every time they checked in, Mario gave glowing updates and made up fake profit numbers to keep them fooled. When I finally understood the full scope of what had happened, I was hit with a storm of emotions: anger, disappointment, and deep concern. I knew I had to step in before things spiraled out of control. After gathering enough evidence, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to tell my parents the truth about Mario before they lost everything. One afternoon in late April, I drove to the small rental house where they stayed in a modest part of San Jose. My mom was surprised to see me show up unannounced, but she still invited me in. The place was tiny and worn down, a stark contrast to the spacious home in Beressa they had sold. My heart sank, realizing just how far they had downsized. My dad was sitting on an old sofa, reading the paper through his glasses. When he saw me, he barely nodded. That distance between us had been there for years, but that day, I was determined to break through it for their own good. I sat down and told them everything I had uncovered about Mario. I told them there was no investment. I told them about the $80,000 luxury car, the upscale apartment, the trips to Vegas, and the money he'd blown at the casinos. I laid out the evidence piece by piece, clearly and calmly. At first, they listened with skeptical expressions. My mom shook her head and said I was overthinking. My dad insisted Mario had been giving them regular updates and that everything was going well. But just as I tried to get through to them, we heard the sound of a key turning in the front door. Mario walked in dressed in an expensive suit and shiny leather shoes. He froze when he saw me, his eyes narrowing instantly. He caught just enough of our conversation to know what was going on and jumped straight into attack mode. His voice turned sharp as he snapped, "You're just jealous of my success, making up lies to tear this family apart." Then he went further, accusing me of always being envious of him since we were kids. He claimed I couldn't stand seeing him succeed in business, so now I was trying to sabotage everything out of spite. He told our parents I was destroying the family because I couldn't handle them having a better life through him. What shocked me was how quickly his words took hold. My parents looked at me with suspicion and disappointment. My mom shook her head sadly while my dad scowled. Then my dad stood up and said firmly, "Rachel, you've always been jealous of Mario, and now you're making up stories to divide this family. That's selfish." My mom chimed in, accusing me of not valuing family and constantly trying to hurt Mario. She told me that if I kept acting so cruel, I wasn't welcome in their home. I made one final attempt. I showed them the evidence the private investigator had collected, but Mario fired back immediately, saying I had paid someone to forge fake documents to destroy him, and they believed him without hesitation. Watching them place blind faith in Mario while turning on me like I was the villain shattered something inside me. I stood up, looked them both in the eye, and said coldly, "One day you're going to regret this." Then I turned around and walked out of the house. From that day on, I cut off all contact with my family. No calls, no texts, no messages of any kind. In my heart, I had officially become a stranger to them. When my parents and Mario showed up looking for me, I was standing at my front door, staring at the three of them and the messy pile of suitcases on the porch. After a few seconds of thinking, I asked them directly, "What are you and Mario doing here?" As soon as I asked, my mom exchanged a glance with my dad, then forced a smile and said, "Rachel, we're family. Your father and I are dealing with financial trouble and need a place to stay. But I wasn't satisfied with that vague answer. I pressed further. What trouble? What happened to the $830,000? My question dropped like a bomb and made the atmosphere even more tense. Mario shot me an angry look while my parents stood there confused and unsure what to say. After a long silence, my dad finally admitted, "The investments didn't go as planned. We need some time to bounce back." Hearing that half confession lit a fire in me. I had warned them before, but they didn't listen. Noticing that I still hadn't let them inside, my mom stepped closer. With pleading eyes, she said, "Rachel, you're our daughter. In times like this, you should help your family." The moment she said that, all the old pain came flooding back. The memory of the last time I saw them was still fresh. I looked her in the eye and shook my head. "I warned you about Mario. You didn't listen, and you kicked me out. Now you're in trouble, and suddenly I'm supposed to bail you out again?" My words made my mom's face drop as she replied quietly, "That's all in the past. Right now, the family needs to help each other." But I wasn't that easy to sway. Years of being mistreated and left behind had hardened me. I kept my distance and said coldly, "I have no obligation to help the people who abandoned me." Seeing that emotional appeals weren't working, my dad straightened up and spoke with authority. "Rachel, we raised you for 18 years. Now it's time for you to give back." The moment he said that, I felt my blood boil. That sentence was the spark that lit all my anger. I shot back bitterly. "Give back? Since I turned 18, I've supported myself. I paid for college, worked to cover rent, bought my own car, and eventually bought this house. Did either of you contribute a single cent to any of that?" My words left them silent. They knew I was telling the truth. Ever since I became an adult, they'd never helped me financially or emotionally. Right then, I felt everything I'd bottled up for years finally explode. I went on. "Everything I have today came from my own sweat and tears. I don't owe you anything." At that point, Mario, who had been quiet until now, suddenly stepped forward, his face red with anger. He shouted, "Rachel, who the hell do you think you are? Losing money is just a normal risk in business." Right after he yelled, I let out a bitter laugh. His words reminded me of everything I had uncovered. I looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "A normal risk? You didn't invest anything. All you did was gamble and blow the money." Hearing me call him out, Mario turned redder and snapped, "What the hell do you know about business? Don't act like you're smarter than me." As the argument escalated, my dad jumped in with a harsh voice and said, "That's enough. You need to help your family. It's your duty." When he said that, it felt like an invisible wall went up between us. I wasn't going to give in to their pressure. Looking them straight in the eye, I answered coldly, "No, I'm not letting you or Mario stay in my house. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." My threat made my mom look at me in disbelief as she said, "You can't do this to your own family." As soon as she said that, I scoffed. The word family sounded empty for me now. "Family," I replied. "Family gave up on me a long time ago." Mario, furious, stepped up and threatened, "You think you'll actually call the cops? You'll regret that." As soon as he approached, I pulled out my phone and started dialing. That move clearly rattled all three of them. My mom rushed in and pleaded, "Rachel, don't do this. We can talk it through." But I was done with empty promises. I kept dialing, ready to call. All the shouting and noise had started to draw attention from the neighbors. I noticed a few people standing in their yards watching the scene. Mr. Daniel, the 70-year-old man next door, even stepped onto his porch to see what was happening. A few more passers-by stopped, forming a small crowd watching our family drama unfold. The growing audience made Mario more agitated. He realized that it wouldn't end well for him if things escalated. My dad also noticed the curious stares and tried to lower his voice as he said, "Rachel, let's go inside and talk privately." But I didn't trust them anymore. Still holding my phone, I said, "No, I want you and Mario to leave now." Seeing how firm I was, Mario completely lost it. Forgetting that people were watching, he shouted, "You ungrateful bitch! We raised you and now you're throwing us out." His voice echoed through the quiet neighborhood, drawing even more people out of their homes. In that moment, I realized there was no going back. This confrontation would change everything. Things escalated quickly when Mario lost control of his anger. He suddenly lunged at me like a wild animal. Before I could react, his fist slammed straight into my face. The punch was so strong it made me stagger. My phone slipped from my hand and shattered on the ground. I could taste the sharp metallic tang of fresh blood in my mouth. The moment Mario hit me, my mom cheered him on instead of trying to stop him. She shouted, "Teach her a lesson. She needs to learn how to respect her family." Her words stabbed me like a knife to the heart. The woman who gave birth to me was now encouraging my brother to beat me up. While I was still trying to regain my balance after the punch, my dad suddenly ran into my garage. He rummaged around and found the gas can I used to fuel my lawnmower. A chill ran down my spine when he came out holding that gas can. His eyes looked crazed, nothing like the man I used to call my father. Before I could fully grasp what was happening, he ran straight toward my SUV, the one I had worked countless hours to afford. He twisted the cap off the gas can and began dumping gasoline all over the vehicle. "What are you doing?" I shouted in panic. But my dad didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a lighter from his pocket and, without a second of hesitation, set the car on fire. The flames ignited instantly, swallowing the front end of the SUV. As the fuel caught, a small explosion went off and thick black smoke began rising into the sky. I tried to run over and extinguish the fire, but Mario tackled me from behind. He wrapped his arms around me and held me down so I couldn't move. "Let me go!" I screamed, struggling with all my strength. But Mario was stronger. He slammed me to the ground and pinned me there. Through gritted teeth, he shouted with hatred, "This is what happens when you turn your back on family. You're going to learn your lesson." Lying on the ground, looking up at the three of them, it felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. Mario and my parents no longer looked like people I knew. They had become monsters. Mario's face was twisted with rage, his jaw clenched tight and his eyes bloodshot. My mother stood nearby with a cruel smile, clapping her hands like she was enjoying a show. And my dad stood next to the burning car, looking satisfied with his act of destruction. In that moment, I realized they weren't my family anymore. They were strangers driven by greed and selfishness who had transformed into creatures without humanity. The fire spread across the car, triggering small explosions as the plastic parts melted. The smoke thickened, rising high into the sky, forming a giant black column that could be seen from far away. Neighbors started screaming and panicking. Some ran into their houses to call the fire department, while others stood frozen, watching in horror. Mr. Daniel, the 70-year-old neighbor, rushed into his house to grab his phone and call 911. I could hear his voice yelling through his window, "Someone's setting a car on fire, hurry!" Meanwhile, Mario still had me pinned down, refusing to let me up. He leaned in and whispered into my ear with a sinister tone, "Now you know what happens when you go against your family." In that moment, I felt like I was drowning in despair. The car I had worked so hard for was going up in flames right in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. By the time the fire had consumed nearly half of my SUV, the sound of police sirens began echoing from down the street. The noise grew louder and clearer as they approached my house. When Mario heard the sirens, he panicked and let go of me. He jumped to his feet with a look of fear, glancing around like an animal cornered with no escape. My dad also looked shaken. He threw the lighter to the ground and stepped away from the burning car. My mom stood frozen, her face pale, as if she had just woken up from a trance. Without saying a word, all three of them suddenly bolted toward their car, trying to flee the scene before the police arrived. They left all 8 suitcases behind, still scattered across my front porch. As for me, I collapsed onto the walkway, watching as the fire devoured the car I had once loved. A wave of helplessness and despair washed over me. A convoy of emergency vehicles came storming into my quiet neighborhood just a minute later. The first fire truck pulled up, followed by police cruisers and an ambulance. The wailing sirens echoed through the streets, drawing more neighbors out of their homes. Firefighters quickly rolled out their hoses and began working to put out the flames. Police officers started cordoning off the area and collecting witness statements. Paramedics approached me to check on my condition. Amid the chaos, Mr. Daniel, the 70-year-old neighbor who lived next door, walked over with a worried expression. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder and said with a warm voice, "Rachel, are you all right?" I called 911 the moment I saw something was wrong. Hearing Mr. Daniel's words, a surge of gratitude welled up inside me. While my own family had tried to destroy my life, it was a neighbor who stepped in to protect me. He continued, his voice calm and reassuring, "I saw everything that happened. I'll be a witness for you." Hearing that, I looked at him with deep appreciation, unable to speak. In the worst moment of my life, I still had the fortune of crossing paths with someone kind like Mr. Daniel. 10 minutes passed. The fire was finally extinguished, but my SUV was utterly destroyed. Thick black smoke still rose from the charred remains, creating a haunting image I knew I'd never forget. A paramedic approached after the fire was put out to check my condition. She gently touched the bruised side of my face and asked about the level of pain. Meanwhile, another police officer began taking my initial statement. This officer seemed very professional as he approached me and asked for details about what had happened. The moment he pulled out his notebook, he asked, "Seriously, can you describe exactly when Mario attacked you?" At that point, I recounted in detail how Mario had punched me and held me down to stop me from intervening while my father set my car on fire. The officer nodded and kept writing notes. While that was happening, other officers were busy collecting evidence at the scene. They took photographs from multiple angles, paying close attention to the burned-out vehicle and the gasoline stains on the ground. One officer found the gas can my father had used. He carefully picked it up with gloves and placed it into an evidence bag. The lighter was collected similarly, along with soil samples from areas stained with fuel. Mr. Daniel and a few other neighbors were asked to give witness statements. When one officer questioned him about what he had seen, Mr. Daniel described everything in detail. Importantly, the officers also discovered nearby security cameras. They contacted me and several neighbors to request permission to review footage from those systems. After gathering enough preliminary information, one officer returned and informed me, "We need you to go to the hospital to get checked out and to create an official injury report. This is very important for the legal process." I nodded in agreement and was taken to the ambulance. The ride to the hospital only took about 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. At the hospital, an ER doctor conducted a thorough medical examination. After checking me carefully, the doctor noted in the report, "Patient has bruising on the face, back, and arms. Signs of mild soft tissue trauma. No broken bones." The complete examination and x-rays took around 2 hours. The medical team photographed all the bruises and injuries, then sealed the documentation and images for legal evidence. A nurse also explained to me the importance of preserving medical records. She said, "Seriously, these files will be kept securely and may be used in court during trial." Hearing her say that, I felt more at ease. I knew that with this documentation, they wouldn't be able to escape justice. After finishing all the procedures at the hospital, I immediately called Nicholas, my best friend and the lawyer I trusted the most. Nicholas and I had known each other since college, and he had become an excellent attorney specializing in criminal law. The phone rang only twice before Nicholas picked up. The moment he heard my voice, he asked with concern, "Rachel, what's going on? You don't sound okay." Without wasting a second, I told Nicholas everything from beginning to end, leaving out no detail. He listened intently, occasionally asking questions to clarify specific points. Once I finished, Nicholas went silent momentarily, thinking things through. Then he spoke in a serious tone. "Rachel, you need to understand the legal situation. Mario could be charged with domestic assault. That's a serious offense. As for your father, he'll likely face arson charges. That's a felony and could lead to a long prison sentence." As soon as Nicholas finished, I quickly asked, "What about my mother?" After a short pause, he added, "Your mom could be charged with incitement and aiding in the assault. The fact that she encouraged Mario to hit you is clear evidence." Hearing Nicholas lay out the possible charges my family might face brought up a mix of emotions inside me. But after everything they had done, I knew I couldn't back down this time. I told Nicholas with a firm voice, "This time I won't forgive them. I want them to pay for what they did in court." Nicholas paused briefly, then said, "I understand, Rachel, and I'll represent you in this case. We're going to make sure justice is served." After hanging up, I felt as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Finally, I had someone on my side, someone ready to fight for justice with me. A few days after the incident, the police officially summoned my parents and Mario to the station for questioning. Nicholas informed me about it and assured me he would monitor the entire process. At first, when questioned by the officers about what happened at my house, all three of them tried to dodge responsibility and denied everything. Mario insisted that I had attacked him first and that he was only defending himself. My father claimed the car caught fire on its own and that he had nothing to do with it. My mother didn't hold back either. She told the officers, "Rachel made everything up. She's always been jealous of her brother and now she's trying to ruin the whole family." However, their attitudes changed completely when Detective Rodriguez, the lead investigator on the case, began presenting the evidence. He showed them footage from a neighbor's security camera. On the screen, they could clearly see Mario punching me. My father taking the gas can from the garage and pouring it over the car, then setting it on fire. The audio also captured my mother shouting encouragement at Mario. When Detective Rodriguez paused the video, the room fell silent. The three couldn't deny what was right there in front of them. The detective went on to present the witness testimonies. Mr. Daniel, Mrs. Wilson, and several other neighbors consistently stated what they saw. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Mario finally admitted that he had hit me, but he still tried to justify himself by saying to the detective, "I just lost my temper." She refused to help the family. My father was also forced to admit to setting the car on fire, though he claimed he only did it to teach me a lesson about family. Once all the statements and evidence were collected, the case file was submitted to the district attorney's office. Prosecutor Williams, a seasoned prosecutor with years of experience, thoroughly reviewed everything. 1 week later, the DA officially filed charges against all three. Mario was charged with domestic assault, a serious offense that could carry a prison sentence of 1 to 3 years. My father faced charges of arson of personal property, a felony that could lead to 2 to 5 years in prison, depending on the extent of the damage. My mother was charged with incitement to assault based on witness testimony and the audio captured on the security footage. This charge could result in a hefty fine and a period of probation. After the DA's office decided to proceed with prosecution, Nicholas called to update me. He said with a satisfied tone, "They've officially been indicted. The trial is scheduled for 2 months from now." That news brought me both relief and anxiety. Justice was finally set in motion, but I knew the real battle was beginning. Deep down, I understood there was no turning back. My family and I would now face each other in court, where the truth would finally be judged. 2 months later, I saw a few local reporters outside when Nicholas and I arrived at the courthouse. My case had drawn public attention because of its unusual nature, a family attacking and setting fire to their own daughter's car. We walked into the courtroom, surrounded by a formal and serious atmosphere. Nicholas walked beside me in a sharp black suit while I wore a navy blue suit, the outfit he had recommended to make a strong impression in court. When I looked across the room, I saw my parents and Mario seated on the defendant's bench with their defense attorney. The sight of them there sent a sharp pain through my chest. My father looked noticeably worn down, more gray hair and dark circles under his eyes. My mother sat with her head lowered, her hands trembling. Mario looked anxious and panicked, constantly scanning the courtroom as if searching for an escape route. Behind me, in the gallery, several neighbors were present. Mr. Daniel sat in the front row, ready to testify. Mrs. Wilson and a few others were also there as witnesses. The tension in the courtroom was so thick it could almost be felt. This wasn't just an ordinary trial. It was the final confrontation between people who had once been a family. All eyes were on us, waiting for the judge to enter. When the sound of the gavel echoed through the room, the trial officially began. After Judge Henderson officially opened the trial, Prosecutor Williams presented the case. He looked serious and confident as he began addressing the jury. First, the prosecutor played the security footage that the police had collected. On the large screen, the jury could clearly see my father taking the gas can from the garage, pouring it over my SUV, and setting it on fire. There was nothing ambiguous or open to interpretation. Next, the video showed Mario holding me down, preventing me from getting up to put out the flames. That image caused some members of the jury to frown, visibly disturbed. Prosecutor Williams then called Mr. Daniel to the stand. He approached the witness box composedly and raised his hand to take the oath before beginning his testimony. When asked by the prosecutor what he had witnessed, Mr. Daniel explained in detail. "I saw the whole thing from my front yard. Mario punched Rachel first. Then the father poured gasoline on the car and set it on fire. I also heard the mother shouting, encouraging her son to keep hitting her." Mrs. Wilson was called to testify next. When she took the stand, she told the jury with conviction, "I saw everything from my window. They attacked Rachel in a coordinated way. It wasn't self-defense." Finally, the prosecutor presented my medical records from the hospital. Photos of the bruises on my face, back, and arms were shown on the screen, along with the doctor's detailed report on my injuries. After concluding the evidence presentation, Nicholas stood up to speak on my behalf. He looked directly at the jury and said clearly, "As you can see, this wasn't an accident or a spontaneous family argument. This was an organized act of violence involving all three defendants." After that, Nicholas continued to emphasize the seriousness of the case and urged the jury to consider all the evidence presented carefully. Finally, the judge allowed me to make a statement to the court. I stood up, feeling every eye in the room on me. I looked straight at the jury and said with a firm voice, "They've abused me since I was a child. This time, I won't let them get away with it." That sentence echoed through the silent courtroom, and I could see emotion on the faces of some jury members. There was one thing I didn't learn until the day of the trial. During the 2 months leading up to it, the police had conducted a deeper investigation into Mario's financial situation. Detective Rodriguez had requested complete bank statements and credit card transaction records for the past 6 months. The results were shocking. Not a single dollar of the $830,000 my parents had given Mario had been invested in any business venture. Instead, the bank records revealed that Mario had spent the entire amount gambling at casinos in Las Vegas. Detective Rodriguez discovered that Mario had taken at least 12 Las Vegas trips over 4 months. He withdrew large sums of money from his account each time and carried it in cash. Hotel bills and airline tickets were all paid using his credit cards. Even worse, Mario had lost all the money and on top of that had racked up nearly $200,000 in additional debt from credit cards and other loans. He had borrowed from multiple financial institutions just to continue gambling, creating a massive web of debt. When Prosecutor Williams presented these findings in court, the courtroom fell silent. The jurors exchanged stunned, disapproving glances. My parents sat on the defense bench, completely speechless as they listened. They finally began to understand why Mario always dodged questions about the investments and insisted that he needed more time. Unable to hold back her emotions, my mother broke down in tears right there in the courtroom. She turned to Mario with a look of heartbreak and disappointment, then sobbed out, "Mario, what did you do? How could you lie to the whole family?" Her crying echoed through the courtroom, touching many people in the room. Even some of the jurors appeared visibly moved by her pain. As for my father, he sat trembling, his hands tightly clasped. After a long silence, he turned toward me. Instead of showing anger toward Mario for destroying the family, with tears in his eyes and a shaking voice, he said to me, "He's still your brother. Please forgive him." Those words triggered a new wave of anger inside me. Even after the whole truth had come to light, even after Mario had lied and destroyed everything, my father was still defending him. I looked at my parents with a cold stare. After everything, they still hadn't learned the lesson about favoritism. Deep down, I knew nothing would ever change their loyalty to Mario. As for Mario, he sat with his head down in silence, unable to look anyone in the eye. He knew that no excuse would matter now, not with evidence this undeniable. After 2 intense days of trial, the jury withdrew to deliberate and reach a final verdict. The wait lasted 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity to me. When the jury returned to the courtroom, the silence was so heavy you could hear the clock ticking. Judge Henderson stood with a solemn expression, ready to deliver the verdict everyone had been waiting for. As the judge began reading the sentences, the first ruling was for Mario. The judge looked directly at him and declared, "The defendant, Mario, is sentenced to 1 year in prison for domestic assault and complicity in property destruction." Hearing the sentence, Mario dropped his head and began to tremble. Next was the ruling for my father. The judge continued in a formal tone. "The defendant is sentenced to 2 years of probation for arson of high-value property. During this probation period, the defendant must not violate any laws." Upon hearing that he had been given probation instead of jail time, my father exhaled in relief. However, he still faced serious legal consequences. Finally, the sentence for my mother. The judge announced, "The defendant is sentenced to 1 year of supervised probation and must complete 500 hours of community service for incitement to violence." In addition to the criminal sentences, the judge issued a civil compensation order. He stated, "The court orders the defendants to reimburse Miss Rachel for the full value of the destroyed vehicle, estimated at $45,000, plus all medical and legal expenses." Once the sentences were fully announced, all 3 of them completely broke down. My mother sobbed uncontrollably, while my father slumped into his seat with a look of total despair. Mario stood up shakily, then suddenly dropped to his knees right before me in the courtroom. Crying, he pleaded, "Rachel, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong." Seeing Mario kneel, my parents immediately followed. Both of them got down on their knees in front of me, completely ignoring the people watching. Through sobs, my mother begged, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I was wrong. Please forgive your family one last time." My father, voice trembling, added, "I know I failed you, but we're still your family. Please forgive us." Looking down at the three of them kneeling before me, a wave of complex emotions surged. Part of me felt a deep sadness seeing them in that state, but an even larger part felt nothing. I stood there in silence for a long moment, then answered, "It's too late." Those words felt like a final verdict, irreversible and absolute. I said nothing more. I turned around and walked out of the courtroom with Nicholas beside me. As I stepped outside the courthouse, Mario remained slumped in despair. He knew a year in prison awaited him, and that once he got out, life would never be the same. My parents sat on a bench outside the building, looking utterly defeated. They had lost their home, their entire savings, and now they had lost me, their daughter. Their lives had collapsed entirely. As for me, walking out of that courthouse, I didn't feel victorious or satisfied like I once imagined I would. Instead, I felt empty and tired. My family was officially broken beyond repair. Nicholas patted beside me. He understood that this wasn't the time for words. The legal battle was over, but the emotional scars remained. As I sat down in the car to go home, one thought echoed in my mind like a private declaration. From now on, I've escaped the shadow of my family. That thought didn't come with triumph or pride. It felt more like accepting a painful truth. I was free, but the cost was losing my family entirely. The car rolled down the road toward home, and I knew that from then forward, I would have to build an entirely new life without the weight or the hope of my old family. 1 year has passed since the trial, and my life has changed significantly. I still live in the same house in San Jose, but now it truly feels like the peaceful place I've always deserved. My career has also progressed since I no longer worry about family drama. I was promoted, and my salary increased substantially. Regarding the compensation, my family contacted Nicholas to propose a payment plan. They no longer had any assets to cover the $45,000 all at once, so they requested to pay it off monthly at $1,000. I agreed to this arrangement, not out of sympathy, but because I understood it was the most practical way to recover the money. Forcing them to work and be financially accountable was in itself a form of justice. I receive a monthly $1,000 bank transfer from my mother's account. No message, no phone call, just a cold financial transaction. Both sides understood this was the only relationship we had left. Their lives had changed entirely. From once owning a home and living comfortably, they now lived in a cramped rental apartment, working hard to survive and pay off their debt to me. Over the past year, I've learned how to live without needing approval from my family, how to find happiness through myself and the relationships I choose to build. However, my peace was suddenly disrupted 2 days ago when the doorbell rang on a quiet Sunday afternoon. When I opened the door, I saw my mother standing there looking worn out and worried. The moment she saw me, she forced a weak smile and said with a trembling voice, "Rachel, I'm sorry to bother you, but your father is very sick." Hearing those words, I stood in the doorway without inviting her in and asked coldly, "So what?" My mother choked up and continued, "The doctor said he needs emergency heart surgery. We need $15,000 because insurance doesn't cover everything. Without the money, the hospital won't do the procedure." Hearing the number, $15,000, I felt anger rise. Once again, they had come to me when they needed money. I looked her straight in the eye and said firmly, "I'm not giving a single cent. Find another way." After my cold refusal, she pleaded, "He's still your father no matter what. Please think about it." But I didn't budge. I stepped back into the house and said, "You made your choice when you sided with Mario. Now you live with the consequences." Then I shut the door, leaving her outside crying and begging. I heard her knocking and calling my name for a few minutes before she finally left. However, that evening, guilt began gnawing at me. No matter how much I resented them, my father was still the man who raised me. I decided to drive to the hospital and see if the story was true. At the hospital, I spoke with a nurse and confirmed that my father was indeed in the ICU. His condition was severe, and the heart surgery was essential to save his life. When I looked through the glass into his hospital room, I saw him lying in bed, hooked up to tubes and machines. He looked frail and old, nothing like the strong man I remembered from childhood. For 2 nights since then, I haven't slept at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, torn between conflicting emotions. Part of me still hated them for everything they had done, but another part reminded me of the years they had cared for me when I was young. I wondered, is this my chance to show mercy, or just another trap for them to use me? Would helping them weaken me, or show that I've grown stronger and more compassionate? Now I'm standing at a crossroads, possibly the most important decision I'll ever make regarding my family. What do you think? Should I help them one last time? Is this my opportunity to prove I'm better than they were? Or should I hold my ground and let them deal with the consequences of their past? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts because this decision might shape the rest of my life. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. Thank you for sticking with me through this long journey. Take care, and I'll see you in the following story.